Okay, so let's talk about work. When things go really wrong on the job, who's actually got your back? Well, in Australia, there's a whole system for that, set up by the Fair Work Act. But how does it really work in practice? Today, we're going to dive into two incredibly different workplace disputes. One is a pretty shocking story of exploitation, and the other, a really complex battle of accusations. We'll use them to understand the system that's designed to protect every single worker. Let's kick things off with a case so extreme, the judge's own words tell you almost everything you need to know.
Wow, you just don't hear a judge talk like that every day. That single sentence, right from a court ruling, tells you we're not talking about a simple disagreement here. It sets the stage for a story of injustice that is, frankly, almost hard to believe.
And that story belongs to a young woman named Taylor Johnson. Her case against her employer, the Village Bakery, is pretty much a textbook example of what the law calls egregious exploitation. This isn't one of those situations with shades of gray. This is about as clear-cut as a case of wrongdoing gets. Just look at how this all unfolded. Taylor, who is only 16 and living with a mild intellectual disability, starts this job back in June 2021. Right away, for the first 3 weeks, she was paid way below the legal minimum wage, and then nothing. For the next 20 months, almost 2 years, she wasn't paid a single cent. It took all that time for the courts to finally bring down a verdict.
But you know, this went so far beyond just not paying her. The court found what it called a systematic pattern of breaking the law. Get this. Taylor was actually coerced into paying for the bakery's supplies and rent out of her own disability support pension. She was even forced to help pay for the owner's trips overseas. And on top of all that, the owner kept no records, wouldn't give Taylor her personal stuff back, and then tried to dodge the court. It was just a complete and total disregard for her rights and for the law itself.
Let's just stop and think about this number for a second. You're supposed to earn money at a job, right? In this case, Taylor was manipulated into spending over $18,000 of her own money to fund her boss's business and lifestyle. It's just a shocking, unbelievable reversal of how employment is supposed to work.
In the end, the court brought down the hammer, and rightly so. It ordered the bakery and its owner to pay over $300,000. That covered penalties, all their unpaid wages, and damages. And the judge was really clear. The penalty had to have a sufficient sting to make sure nobody would even think about trying something like this again. A huge, decisive victory for justice.
So Taylor's case was a clear injustice. Pretty black and white. But you know, workplace disputes are rarely that simple. What happens when the facts are murky? When both sides have really serious claims? Well, that brings us to a much more complex case. Matthew McGrain, a veteran TV producer, versus his employer, the 7 Network.
Now this is a classic he said, she said scenario, happening in a really high-pressure industry. On one side, you have Mr. McGrain, who is a paraplegic. He claims that after a workplace accident, he was discriminated against, denied compensation, and basically pushed to the side. But on the other hand, the 7 Network says no. Any changes to his job were because of serious misconduct. They allege that multiple staff members came forward with complaints about a toxic and, quote, soul-crushing work culture under his leadership.
And the allegations against Mr. McGrain are incredibly serious. According to the court documents filed by 7, junior colleagues said he was often aggressive and that several young female producers felt unsafe and were frequently left in tears because of his management style. I mean, these are really heavy claims.
But Mr. McGrain's version of events is completely different. He claims that when he came back to work, he was systematically sidelined. His duties were stripped away, and his role was diminished. He sees this as a form of bullying, so you see the problem, right? Was he being punished because of his disability and his compensation claim, or was it because of his alleged behavior?
And here's the thing. Unlike the bakery case, this one is nowhere near finished. After they tried mediation and it failed, the claim is still active in the federal court. A final hearing date hasn't even been scheduled yet, which leaves both sides kind of stuck in this legal limbo.
So, with these two very different stories in our minds, let's zoom out for a second and take a look at the legal framework that's actually designed to protect all of us in situations like these.
At the very heart of that 7 Network case is this key legal idea called general protections. So what is that? Well, basically, it's the part of the law that protects your right to speak up at work. It means your boss can't take adverse action against you, like firing you or cutting your hours, just because you exercised a workplace right. This is so important because it's meant to stop retaliation, which is often the biggest fear people have when they need to make a complaint. Now, proving it can be tough, but these protections are a really powerful safeguard.
Okay, so what should you do if you find yourself in a tough spot at work? Well, first, try to figure out what the specific problem is. Is it unfair dismissal, discrimination, something else? Second, and this is crucial, know the time limits. For unfair dismissal, you only have 21 days to file a claim. That's not a lot of time. Third, gather everything, and I mean everything. Contracts, emails, payslips, any record you can find. And finally, get some expert guidance. You really don't have to figure all this out on your own.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway from these two wildly different stories? Why does this stuff matter to every single person with a job? Let's pull it all together.
When you put these cases side by side, the contrast is just stark. On one hand, you have the Village Bakery case, an awful black and white case of exploitation that ended in a clear, decisive legal win. And on the other hand, you have the 7 Network case, a complicated, messy, and contentious discrimination claim that is still completely unresolved.
And that's really the central lesson here, isn't it? The world of workplace justice isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It covers this huge spectrum, from obvious violations that demand swift punishment to these deeply complicated fights where finding the truth is, well, it's a lot harder.
And all of this leads to one final, really important question. And I want you to ask yourself this right now, honestly. If something went wrong for you at work tomorrow, would you know your rights? Would you have any idea where to even begin?
Look, the system can be complicated, and as we've seen, the outcomes are not always certain. But what these two cases make crystal clear is that while workplace justice isn't always simple, understanding your fundamental rights, that's not just helpful. It is the essential first step to protecting yourself, no matter what situation you find yourself in.